Hey, wow, look, guys, there's a new memo. We definitely didn't talk about this for 6 minutes already with copyrighted music in the background. Um, yeah, so there's two ways to interpret this. Either there is either they just, well, we know they fucked up, but either one of their fuck ups is addressing the quality of the familiars and they're just saying that it was incorrect, implying that it was a bug. I We could double check, but I'm pretty sure they kind of said the same thing about the jet no cooldown starfall as well. Where during the process they said yes, it's okay, yes, it's intended. People are like, are you sure this is intended? And they say yes, it's intended, yes, this is okay. And then it went through, and then it was like, okay, never mind, this is bad. We're gonna fix it. And then it's like it was unintended. It was not supposed to be this way. It's like, well, yes, it was. It was supposed to be this way, but your intentions were just wrong. And you fucked up because you didn't test it enough. Same way with the familiars. I think, well, definitely the part of the input for the drop rate, right? Because yes, they said the drop rate was intended. Yes, people check. So like, are you really, really sure? There's a lot of these dropping. Are you really sure this drop rate is intact? It's like, yes, it's intact. We will keep it like this for now. Okay. And then 24 hours later, they're like, let's cut it down by a power of 1,000. Like, this is clearly like it wasn't a bug before. It wasn't abuse before. It wasn't anything like it wasn't a bug before. They just horribly miscalculated their side of the equation, and it's definitely not on the players, right? Fixing it afterwards for everyone across the board, that would be a great thing. Just like with this, right? Fixing the potential lines, resetting them to what they think now is a better balance for the game across the board for everyone. That's a way better move than just leaving it the way it is, right? Because not only do you just fill the gap a little bit, at least on the quality side, still not on the quantity side, but at least on the quality side, and you release the gap, and by doing it this quickly, you make it so that the people who have these super strong familiars don't get used to using them for a long time, and therefore can get used to the idea of them getting weaker very quickly, and therefore settle into their new power creep much more organically, rather than having them rely on this for like a year or so and then cutting it back a year later and then it feels like a huge trick, and it's like, well, it was this whole time, how can you say it was unintended a year later, right? Which is historically what Maple has done a bunch of times, where they say like, oh, this is going to get fixed because this was unintended, and it's like 2-3 years in the making. And I think at that point, people in the community, with like telefarming and all that stuff, at that point, people in the community have I think a stronger case. I think it's still not like right, but like a stronger case to say like, well, it was like this for so long. How are we supposed to realistically know for ourselves that it was unintended? Not for for all the mesofarming and the telefarming and the key waiting and all that shit. I think that still isn't like a good enough argument. But for stuff like this, like the longer you leave it, the worse it just gets. So fixing it somewhat immediately, like Thursday the 30th, and rolling that back, I think is great. That way I don't have to feel like, well, because people who are like thinking about this morally, like, well, does that mean that I can't use my unique line epic potential familiars that I have now that I did get back then? Because like morally, you shouldn't be using them if it was incorrectly set, right? And also it gives you like a huge unfair advantage against other players, even though compare yourself to other people in the game is already inherently a little bit silly because everyone has a different amount of time, different amount of hours. That's the same thing. Different kinds of efficiency, different desires on what they do in the game. So it's already kind of silly to compare to other people too much. But yeah, just like setting examples, staying morally consistent, all of that stuff. So I'm glad they fixed it, so that I don't have to like worry or like have to have other people probably. Well, what would probably happen is that other people would be like accusing you of morally grandstanding, that you're like, well, I feel like everyone should not be using these familiars because of the high potential tier and because they said it was unintended. Blah 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 blah. So the fact that they're just fixing it just takes that whole conversation away from the whole community. Any kind of diversions, the divisions that can come in a community from that is like completely eradicated because everyone just has to play with the same, the same quality of familiars at least. There's still the problem of the quantity, and that's still not being addressed, and I wonder if they ever will. I severely wonder if they ever will. The only way that this can even remotely get properly addressed is if in some way Reboot, I'm speaking very specifically for Reboot here because non-Reboot already has this. If Reboot has some kind of way of getting the red familiar cards to be able to get people, because getting epic familiars is definitely very possible. You can just you can farm common ones, get a few rare ones, squeeze all of them together, fuse them up, level them up, boom, upgrade them to epic. Maybe a few tries if you fail, and then roll with epic cards, or push that one all the way and even get a unique one. That'll be a long process. But then once you have a unique one, then you can work on that. And like even if you have a unique one, you would want one with drop rate. You would want one with like a different type of drop rate. You would want at least 1 or 2 healing ones. You'd want at least 1 or 2 with boss damage, 1 with IED. Like there's so many that you need. And then for every single character, and they're untradeable. Like in no way will this be a system where it's like, oh, now people are done so easily and they can just move on and they can immediately like take full advantage of this power creep, right? Depending on how common the red cards would be. And even if they would be rather common, it would still mean a huge process. And if the red cards just cost money, which is like the general resource that everything comes from in Reboot, it would still have to divide our resources among all these sources of damage, and it would just be one more cog in the wheel of upgrading, basically. So I think I've already messaged a bunch of options that I think are very viable of getting red cards in into the game. Some obvious ones, like putting them into the daily gift from the Fairy Bros somewhere, maybe once or twice a month, right? Maybe making them available in a limited amount in event stores. I've also considered adding them, which I think is a good thing, as drops in Moonbridge and higher areas, because like min-maxing on your familiar's potential is typically something you start doing pretty far in the game anyway, and those areas are lacking significant drops because they don't drop droplets or symbols, not even like a symbol selector coupon or like a droplet selector coupon or anything like that. They just drop nodes and money and that's it. So I think adding some drop to those higher level areas would also be nice, and maybe a max amount per month that you could buy in the cash shop, either for money or for reward points. Preferably for money there, not for reward points, because our reward points, if you go back to our original cap, a lot of people want to use all their reward points anyway for the totems. Even though the totems got a little bit cheaper, so there's some wiggle room. But then for non-reboot, that would come into play as well. So yeah. I'm thinking of this very, very reboot centric. So if you guys are in non-reboot, like this isn't gonna. You guys are probably thinking like, what is he talking about? But yeah. So during next maintenance, we will also update the Lotus familiars obtained prior to version 2.15 to have the legendary rank. Familiar cards dropped by Lotus should be unique rank, but there was a bug that set them as legendary rank in version 2.13 and 2.14. Okay. Again, it's weird that it's a bug, because if you looked in the Metal tab and you looked at the available Lotus cards, they were green outlined. So they seemed consistently shown as legendary. So again, I wonder if... I'm very skeptical of it being a bug. But, this issue was addressed in 2.15, but it caused an error where the Lotus familiar cards already obtained by players were also changed to unique. Since the obtained familiar cards were legendary in 2.13 and 13, and Lotus familiar cards obtained prior to version 2 will be restored to their legendary rank. Wait, so they were meant to be unique, and they got rolled down to unique, but they will roll them back to legendary? Just because people had them and they would be too angry and upset if they would get rolled down? So they're doing the opposite here. I guess it's way less of an impactful thing, because this is probably like 5 people who got this or something. So what they're doing here seems to be the exact opposite of what they're doing here. Here they're like, well, there was a mistake, so we're rolling everything back to... We're rolling everything forward to... be in congruency with the current logic, and then this is like, oh, we had a mistake, so we're rolling it back to be in congruency with our mistake again. Huh. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this whole ordeal, about this whole system. Where do you put some of the blame? Where do you put some of the responsibility? Where do you well, probably a lot of it with Nexon, but like which part of the whole process do you think was handled the best? Which part of the process do you think was handled the worst? And how do you hope they move forward with this information and with this experience? Because I think it's definitely like the worst part is if this all happened and the next time another system comes out and the same shit happens, right? Like that would be the worst. Yeah, so I know there's in my opinion, like there's a lot to learn from this, but specifically from the design process part, like properly gauging your input for your system and properly testing your system could have prevented, I think, like 99% of the problems here. You still have small problems, and I think the rolling back of the familiars when they added them to the badges and everything probably was something that didn't happen in a test environment, and they had no idea how to really fix that. And it took them a bit to fix it. Probably not as long as how much time was actually in between, because there was a summer update in between, of course, which had priority to be rolled out during the summer. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about that in general.